Right, for full disclosure from the very off, if you ask me for my favourite decade of horror, chances are I'll be going with the 1980s. This was a time when practical effects were at their very peak, with Rob Bottin, Rick Baker, Tom Savini and Stan Winston amongst the names ruling the roost and delivering mesmerising, jaw-dropping work. And as a result of that, it's also a decade where horror hounds were treated to some genuine, all-time great creature features, which is what we're taking a look at today. So with that in mind, I'm Andrew from What Culture Horror, and here are the 10 best creature features of the 1980s. Number 10. Razorback. Once Steven Spielberg's Jaws broke a whole bunch of box office records and home release records, that ushered in a whole bunch of man versus nature type movies, one of which was 1984's Razorback. Based around a giant boar rampaging through the Australian outback, Razorback understood that part of the success of Jaws was that the threat of the day was rarely seen, leaving audiences' imaginations to fill in the blanks. Whenever the Razorback tosses a car in the air or tears a house in half, you understand its destructive power despite only getting a brief glimpse of the rascal. The film also puts a nice focus on human conflict, with hostile locals appearing with such frequency that you can forget there's a man-eating pig on the loose. While creature features can be a smidge formulaic, Razorback is refreshingly unpredictable, including taking a page out of Psycho's playbook and having a shocking death early on, in turn smartly establishing some stakes. Number 9. From Beyond. So many talented filmmakers have struggled to adapt the work of H.P. Lovecraft for the big screen, but one person who has done a cracking job on that front is Stuart Gordon. While Reanimator is his better known Lovecraft adaptation, Gordon absolutely knocked it out of the park with his take on From Beyond. Our story begins with Dr. Pretorius and his team putting the finishing touches on a device that will allow them to see past regular reality and into other dimensions. Unfortunately, Pretorius is turned into a twisted monstrosity after being exposed to all of this, and the remaining scientists are tasked with destroying him. Now, From Beyond isn't necessarily conventionally scary, but it's completely fantastic on a technical level, particularly when it comes to the stunning practical effects for the various forms of the ever-evolving Pretorius. Granted, the weirdly gratuitous sex scenes, yeah, they don't really work, but Stuart Gordon captures the unique mood and atmosphere of Lovecraft like few others ever have. Number 8. Night of the Creeps. In Fred Decker's Night of the Creeps, college student Chris accidentally unleashes a cryonic alien zombie on a fraternity. Hey, we've all been there. Now, Night of the Creeps absolutely knows how goofy it is, but it's also an incredibly smart movie. The story deliberately setting up cliched subplots, only to go in unexpected directions. Also, the creeps don't operate like traditional zombies, because they're controlled by extraterrestrial parasites after all. If these flesh eaters are killed, the parasites burst out and infect anybody nearby, meaning our heroes of the day have to be a little more strategic to stay alive, adding something different to your standard zombie picture. Sadly, Night of the Creeps sank without a trace at the time of its release, but thankfully it's nowadays looked at as a somewhat cult classic by genre fans. Number 7. The Blob. Despite its innovative premise and imaginative for the time effects, 1958's The Blob isn't exactly all that scary. However, the 1988 Blob is proper nightmare fuel, as we see victims melted in meticulous detail after being exposed to the titular beast. The Blob also has a degree of intelligence here, strategically looming above unsuspecting victims, trapping them in phone booths, hunting them through sewers, and even slithering into buildings through sinks. Of course, then there's the special effects on display, with Tony Gardner and his crew doing some truly phenomenal work here, pulling out all the stops with animatronics, puppets, trick photography, stop motion, and all kinds of elaborate makeup setups. Also, the 1988 Blob, while following a similar structure to the original, had a nice twist at the halfway point, meaning this isn't just a beat-for-beat retread. Number 6. Pumpkinhead. Hey, any chance I have to talk about Pumpkinhead, I will always take. With special effects icon Stan Winston in the director's chair this time out, Pumpkinhead is a blast, even if it was unfortunately a financial failure. Plot-wise, we have the locals of a small town facing off against a towering demon. While that sounds pretty straightforward, the fact that it's Stan Winston, as in the effects guru behind the likes of Terminator 2, Aliens, and Jurassic Park, that means we're in for a visual treat treat here. The bulky size and spindly design of Pumpkinhead are unsettling, but it's the terrific use of lighting, staging, and special effects that truly make the monster shine. Also, Pumpkinhead has some properly effective jump scares, without, just lazily resorting to cheap tactics or those usual blaring noises, the ones. Yeah, Pumpkinhead, man, it is just a proper delight. As for the 3 sequels, though, yeah, maybe not so much so. Although Pumpkinhead Blood Feud isn't totally awful. The other 2 films, though, yeah, total trash. Number 5, Society. From the great Brian Usner, Society is a brilliant ooey-gooey mix of body horror and classic creature feature tropes, revolving around young Bill, who lives a rather charmed life at his parents' luxurious California estate. Still, something doesn't quite sit right with Bill. He struggles to fit in, and the strange behavior of his family and friends convince him that they're hiding something. It nicely takes its time setting up this mystery, but the something of Society is certainly, well, yeah, it is something. Yep, the ominous secret hinted at throughout the film, that turns out to be a true sight to behold, with Bill discovering that basically every significant person in his life is an otherworldly shapeshifter who indulges in human sacrifice and melding their bodies together for sexual pleasure in an act called shunting. The warped perspective, slimy textures, and crimson lighting of Society's big reveal make for a grand old time, with the tension and slick social commentary on display, making this a bona fide 80s classic. Number 4, Gremlins. Sure, Gremlins is a family favourite that often gets brought out for a rewatch every single Christmas season, but it's a properly twisted film that's dripping with mystery. What is the creature that Billy's father bought? Why can't Gizmo get wet? What happens if the Mogwai eats after midnight? What the heck is going to come out of those darn cocoons? Also, the creatures of the title, they don't rock up until the halfway point of Gremlins. Of course, Gremlins is worthy of a whole bunch of praise for nicely balancing horror and comedy. Yes, the Gremlins are frightening, but those cheeky scams have plenty of hilarious moments that get funnier the more you think of them. Seriously, why did that one Gremlin caroler? Why are they putting on earmuffs if, they don't even cover the ears? Number 3, An American Werewolf in London. When looking back at the very best of 1980s horror, more often than not you'll find exceptional practical effects work at their core. And when it comes to creature features of that time, it would be impossible to ignore An American Werewolf in London, the winner of the very first Academy Award for Best Makeup. This 1981 film is the stuff of legend, featuring some of the greatest effects work of all time. Effects that stand up magnificently to this very day, over 40 years after the film's release. Away from the effects work though, there's so much brilliance in An American Werewolf in London. With Animal House and Blues Brothers already on his resume at that point, writer-director John Landis brings some fantastic one-liners and visual gags to the table here, with the more light-hearted moments nicely juxtaposed with the horror on offer. 1 minute, a family is watching the Muppets. The next, they're being attacked by Nazi demons. The tone here, it could be jarring in other hands, but John Landis nicely navigates all of that, crafting a story that's both hilarious and genuinely creepy. An absolute all-timer of a horror picture by any metrics. Number 2, The Fly. Speaking of old-timers, we've got a couple more left to cover here, starting with David Cronenberg's The Fly, a film that maybe doesn't get enough credit for just how succinct it is. Rather than spending an age on setup, The Fly gets straight to the point from the get-go, opening with Seth Brundle in mid-conversation with journalist Veronica as they discuss teleportation. Within a matter of seconds, The Fly puts its core premise on the table, and just a few minutes later, we understand Brundle's backstory, his passions, his goals, making us immediately invested in his doomed teleportation project. On the flip side, unlike the 1956 version of The Fly, this 1986 film nicely takes its time with Brundle's transformation, with that metamorphosis being a gradual one rather than an immediate one. In fact, Brundle doesn't reach his final form until The Fly's twisted final moments, and watching him gradually come to terms with his ever-evolving body is fascinating. The eccentric scientist embracing his transformation one moment, then wallowing in self-pity the next. He may go full villain in the final act, but it's hard not to feel sorry for Seth after seeing what he's been reduced to, with Jeff Goldblum delivering a career best performance, at times without even speaking a word, and being covered in 5 pounds of breathtaking facial makeup. Number 1, The Thing. Seriously, if John Carpenter's 1982 The Thing wasn't in this video, what even are we doing here? Yeah. Regardless of the advancements made with CGI over the decades, few films can compete with the brilliance of Rob Bottin's practical effects masterclass that was The Thing. While the special effects of The Thing are literally the stuff of legend, let's face it, pretty much every single aspect of the film is utter perfection. No shot is wasted, not a single line of dialogue is thrown away, and every character, no matter how minor, feels needed, all brought to life by an impeccable cast, of course. Then on top of all of that, we've got Ennio Morricone's pitch-perfect eerie soundtrack that complements every single scene it's in. When you look at The Thing, it's just an exemplary movie in how to craft tension, with every moment drenched in anxiety and apprehension, as a shape-shifting threat of the day can be anyone or anywhere. Even on multiple viewings, scenes like the blood testing sequence, they are still so intense all these years later. John Carpenter has well and truly earned his stripes and that horror master nickname over the years, thanks to the likes of Halloween, The Fog, Christine, and Prince of Darkness. And The Thing, it may well be the iconic director's finest hour, which is certainly saying something.